Hi, folks. Welcome to the bite-sized version of Reducing Trauma in Production with SLOs and Chaos Engineering. I am Mandy Walls, a DevOps advocate at PagerDuty, and with me today,
I'm Julie Gunderson, a senior reliability advocate at Gremlin. We're super excited to be here with you today for your coffee break. Mandy, want to get us kicked off here?
Yeah, absolutely. So at PagerDuty, we have a practice that we refer to as full service ownership. And this is about the maintaining of reliability of services in production by the teams that create those services, right? So your application engineers kind of owning what's going on in production. So knowing how services are performing and setting goals around that performance is key to keeping users happy, right? So setting service level indicators and service level objectives based on user behaviors and using your air budgets then to guide the activities your team performs will help your team meet your reliability goals and keep your users coming back and, keep that trauma in production kind of low, right? So sometimes we get asked, how do I talk with my product team, with my business partners when there's an incident or customer impacting event? And the question's kind of backwards. Part of launching a service is kind of acknowledging in advance that there will be times when the performance and reliability of the service isn't meeting your goals. And that's just kind of how things happen when you get to production. There's like an imaginary EULA that you click and says, yes, I acknowledge. Things might not always be what I want them to be. So to deal with this, we have our SLIs, we have our SLOs, our service level indicators, and our objectives. They go together to help our team focus on the reliability of all of our services. So finding the best indicators for your services might require some work if your team is still establishing your metrics and your telemetry. And then when you have found the indicators that best reflect the things that are most important to your users, then you can set those objectives, right? And there's plenty of content here at SLOconf to help you do that. But at the most basic level, we're looking for the things that users care about the most so that we're not spending a lot of time and resources over executing on the things that maybe our users don't care about as much, right? So improving the performance is really the whole point of going through the whole exercise. We're not going to do it just for the point of it or because someone thinks it's cool. We want to figure out what's important to our users, how we know that that's important to our users, and how we can then ensure that the work that we're doing is enhancing their experience and not detracting from it. And it might be different across different parts of our applications so that, if there is a new feature that's out there, but it's not well adopted, maybe we can back off waking people up in the middle of the night for it and just kind of let it ride for a while when things happen. So we're trying to manage all of the stress that goes into running things in production by prioritizing things through the use of SLIs and SLOs. In addition to, establishing the parts that our users care most about, we're going to set up all this telemetry to keep an eye on all that stuff, right? You want to keep your monitoring effective and not overload with metrics that don't have direct ties back to user experience. And some things will, like some system utilities, memory allocation, CPU utilization, in some instances and some services, when those things get wobbly, user experience also follows. Sometimes it doesn't. It might depend on how scaled out your application is. It might depend on time of day. There might be times when that sort of system data is just kind of noise and it's not what's impacting your user experience, right? But then also don't end up telling you directly things like load time for pages or execution time for queries or how long it takes to receive a response back from upstream dependencies, or things that seem really crazy, like when I click buy, how long does it take to get an email to let me know that that order has been processed? Those kinds of things that our users care about. So you may find that your set of metrics gets expanded until you find the ones that work best.
Well, and that's the key here too, Mandy, right? Because without SLOs, how do you know if when something breaks, if it needs to be fixed immediately, or if it's something that can wait until maybe you have your coffee in the morning? How do you know if those measures that you've set are working? So you're validating and you're monitoring those metrics, and we can imagine what that customer experience is going to look like where these things are able to happen in our timelines. But just having an observability practice in place, it doesn't mean that we're in the clear. We need to validate that we're tracking those metrics in the right way and that our dashboards are reporting relevant information and that our alerts are actually guaranteed to notify the right people at the right time. So you versus me versus you, 3:00 in the morning, always going to be you. So while we could wait for a production incident to occur, this is a reactive approach, and that exposes us to a lot of risk. So instead, we want to think of how can we proactively test our observability practice by simulating those production conditions. And that's what we do with chaos engineering. So for example, if application responsiveness is one of our SLOs, we should make sure that our monitoring tool can detect changes in latency and response time. But how do we do this without putting our systems at risk? And again, it goes back to chaos engineering, because that's the practice of deliberately injecting that failure into our system and then observing how it responds and using our observations to improve the reliability. And the key word here is observe. So without visibility, we can't accurately determine how failures affect our systems, our SLOs, and the customer experience. So observability really helps us measure the impact of failures and the impact of our fixes in a meaningful and objective way.
Yeah, and another place where we talk to folks a lot about working on this is working with dependencies. And if you're in an environment that has a lot of microservices or has just a lot of different things going on, you probably have a lot of dependencies, right? And the whole practice kind of stumbles around if your team isn't sure, exactly where your dependencies are and what your services are relying on, right? So setting achievable SLOs is super hard, right? If not impossible. So you must know what your services are using, where it lives, and ideally who owns it if there's a problem, what requests you're making, and what other components are needed, so that when your application isn't doing what you're expecting, you can start to dig down through and figure out what's going on there. So this is one of those places where we might have to use words and not code to, talk to people in other parts of our organization to improve reliability across the board, right? And hopefully you have like SRE folks or other engineers who can help you work with those kinds of things. But for experience for your customers, it's super important. The other thing to remember when you are, at the end of an outage call or having other issues is that, these aren't a cudgel for beating your team, right? There's not something that you're going to share with your users. That's what your SLAs are for, and they've got lawyers and maybe insurance companies involved or whatever. But this is for your team to manage your work and your priorities, right? And you might find out that the SLOs for a new service are too aggressive, right? And if that's the case and user experience isn't impacted in a crazy way, there's no reason not to loosen them. So you can be super flexible and learn every time you come up to those boundaries and say, oh, well, we did this thing and it kind of pushed things too far. So maybe we need to reevaluate. And it gives you that real-time feedback loop so that you're not spending all of your resources on the wrong things.
Absolutely, Mandy. And it really is about that real-time feedback loop. So I just really want to quickly talk about how you can use chaos engineering to test out the new features and focus on your SLOs. So the first thing that you want to do, and if you can flip to the next slide, Mandy, you want to adopt the practice in development so engineers are just architecting for failure, right? You can get confident testing in development, and then you move to staging, and you start small in staging, then you expand that blast radius, and you move into production, and you start small and increase. Very similar to how you do development, so you don't need to overthink this. You want to just work iteratively, like with code, move up the environments like you do with code. And Mandy, if you want to take us onto upstream dependencies here.
Yeah, so if you have other dependencies that you're working on, like we were just talking about, do they publish SLOs? Is it a requirement in your organization that they do that, right? Knowing who owns a service, having good practice around all of this sort of universally in your environment is an initial step on the path to maturity around these. If you need to, can you defensively code around bad performance in a dependency? Can you put a hold down in? Do you change your timeouts? How do you deal with taking something out that isn't responsive? And do you need to explore alternatives? Is there another path to getting the information that you want? Do you need to put your own cache up instead of querying a database directly? All kinds of things that you can do to make your service more reliable if you are dealing with someone else that isn't as reliable as they should be.
Yeah, and you can use chaos engineering to identify critical paths. You can run black hole attacks where you're blocking all traffic to an application. There's lots of ways that you can do this. Now, we only have 10 minutes here today. So as in snack size, you can find Mandi and I on Twitter. Reach out to us and we can talk more about the ways that you can use chaos engineering and understanding your unplanned work. But really, in summary, SLOs prioritize that user experience, or SLIs do. SLOs quantify good versus bad. Mandi, I actually just took your slide away from you.
That's fine. Yeah, we skipped one, but it's okay.
Either way, SLOs are great. You can reduce trauma in production. You want to make sure that you practice and you want to make sure that everything that you're doing is focusing on that customer. Anything else to add, Mandi?
Nope. Just make sure that what you're after is work prioritization and reducing harm and resource waste.
And thanks everybody for hanging out with us today. Again, you can find us on Twitter and don't forget to follow SLOconf as well. Thanks.